Thank you for being here to join us for Red Flags and Right Questions, How Drivers Stop Fraud. I'm Todd Waldron, Vice President of Carrier Experience at truckstop.com, and I'm joined by a good friend and mentor of mine, Dale Prax, CEO and founder of Freight Validate, and also a strategic advisor to truckstop.com as well. We're excited to talk to you today about practical solutions to really combat and be aware of the fraud that then can often translate into cargo theft. So we're going to learn from one of the greats who has so much wisdom, knowledge, and what I have particularly noticed is passion on this topic. So I'm going to kick it to Dale to give us an intro of his background and a little bit of where that passion comes from.
Yeah. My name is Dale Prax. I'm, like Todd said, I'm the president and CEO and founder of Freight Validate, which is a vetting platform. We've all heard about the vetting platforms from 20 years past, and they've all been about let's vet the hell out of the carriers, and we're forgetting to vet the brokers and the shippers and those kind of people, and we've just missed that. And I think that one of the reasons that happened was because a lot of times owner-operators of small fleets can't afford to buy tires, let alone a vetting platform. The other part is that vetting platforms are, they know, those vetting platforms know that brokers sometimes make more money than the one-truck operation, so they don't solicit them. They don't use them as customers. And I wanted to build a platform. I've been in the business for this is my 34th year. I owned a fleet of trucks for a while, about 65 trucks. I've been a broker for 25 years, so I've got both sides of it. I was a shipper. So I've been around the block a little bit. And when I had my brokerage, I built this platform because, like I said, the only thing around was a platform that started in 2000, been around 25 years, which has since kind of morphed into more of a, I'm a broker, I'm going to tell on you, emotional kind of platform. But in the last 5 years, we've had several platforms emerge. But I built mine as a broker, and I never had a load stolen or I never had a fraudulent activity because I think we built a good program. And it had facial recognition verification, all those kind of things. And I wanted to build something that brokers, carriers, MX carriers, enterprise carriers are all vetted equally. So that's what we did. And it's been pretty successful. But what we're trying to do now is, because the owner-operators of small fleets don't have access to that, basically, they're using like Safer or they're using L&I to get their information. And as we all know, all that information is really self-certified. I'm putting in the information, wasn't really getting checked until Modus came about and is really starting to clamp down on that. But we still have the issue until that all happens. So we want to build something that everybody can use. And we want to also educate the owner-operators on there's some questions you need to ask of your broker and your shipper. Because, like I said, you've been vetted and asked questions and beat up for 25 years. You've never had the opportunity to, hey, I'm going to vet you. I need to know about you. I need to know who I'm getting this load from. And that's kind of what this day is about, trying to teach you that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to have you here. I want to start with kind of a broader view, and then we'll drill down into some more operational takeaways that we can really put into practice. But Secretary Duffy's here, Derek Bars is here, and they've been very active and engaged from a component of vocal about how, whether it's AI can help crack down on freight fraud. But do you see this federal attention actually changing anything for drivers on the ground, or is it still on them? But how do you see that view of now this federal kind of push and awareness around this topic?
Yeah, I think that the FMCSA has done more in the last 5 months than it's done in the last 5 decades. Wow. I think that there's been some real action. I think we got the right people in place. I've had several conversations with Ken Riddle over the years, the director of registration. I've met with Derek Bars several times. I just know that their heart is there. They want to take care of us like never before. And we can see in the actions they've taken. I mean, in this short 5 months, we've done things like rulemaking or notices about buying and selling of MC numbers. We've done things about, I know they're working really hard on those folks that have a post office box or a UPS store as their principal place of business. They're really cracking down on that. Those are all important things that will get rid of a lot of fraud. There's some more, obviously there's more to do. No matter if it's never going to be one and done. They're never going to fix it and we're going to move on. Yep. But they are really making strides, and they understand that premise that, we're not going to make a platform that's going to be around today and then 10 years they're going to laugh at us, right? It's going to keep building.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so we're in this interesting landscape, right? When I started in transportation some 17 years ago, the primary fraud we'd have to worry about, it was like a fuel advance fraud or a T-check fraud, right? Where someone would show up and pretend to pick up the load and get a fuel advance. And straight theft cargo or on-the-ground cargo theft was the primary, or pilferage was some of the primary cargo theft. Over the last 3 years, we've seen strategic theft just expand and explode from a percentage basis.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how straight theft differs from strategic theft? And I mean, because fraud is such a broad term, and fraud is such a specific or kind of a broad umbrella that captures so many different things. But what is strategic theft, and what does that definition differ from straight theft?
Yeah, well, straight theft was when the guy would pull into the truck stop and somebody cut the seal and break in and steal stuff out of there. Or like, well, it's kind of funny when Derek Bars, I don't know if anybody saw him talk about today, when they went to the scale and said, hey, you're overweight, we need 5 of these watermelons off of there, and the guy smashed them in the ground rather than handing them. That was like trooper kind of theft. No. But straight theft was just stealing stuff at that time, right? Today, cargo theft, usually that load is stolen before the truck backs into the dock. It's all identity theft that starts it, right? We're stealing identities, and that causes us to steal the freight. Strategic theft defined really is deception or fraud in the act of stealing cargo. So it's really evolved a lot. It used to be like, and the analogy I like to give to people that are old like me is, back in the old days, there used to be several different wrestling rings, right? Yeah. There was Jerry Lawler was in Atlanta, Minneapolis was Vern Gagne. And that's kind of how fraud was at that time. It was Glendale, California, Chicago. But now, this thing is morphed into the WWE. It's worldwide. I mean, we're buying, stealing things and then having them sold on the black market, and that freight could be on a plane the next day heading somewhere we don't know where it's going to. Yeah. So strategic cargo theft is probably the most important thing to watch out for, and it's all tied into the safety part, right? Because we don't know who we're dealing with. And we have thousands of carriers on the rolls right now. Out of 327,000 carriers, give or take, there are probably 10% of those that shouldn't be in the platform at all.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So as we dig deeper into a topic you kind of or talked about in your intro, the component of drivers get vetted and questioned all the time, right? But rarely flip around the questions onto the broker or the shipper they're working with. So what are some of those specific questions to get to the root and try to identify, is this a red flag? What are the red flags we should be watching, and what are the questions to get to them?
Yeah, I think the most important question that I asked, any of my drivers ever asked when they were going to pick up a load, and when they got to the shipper's office, the first question they should ask is, who did you broker this load to? Because sometimes that doesn't match who brokered the load to you. And if that's a problem, we're in a double brokering situation. So that's probably the most important question. But you also have to have questions of the shipper, like, what MC number or DOT number do you have planned to pick this thing up? Before you give your information to them, ask them for the information back. I think that sometimes if we ask open questions, they may lie to us, right? Mm-hmm. I'm DOT number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is that who you booked? Yes, it is. Yep. But if you say, what DOT number did you give this to, that could be a different answer. Yeah. I think that we talk a lot about which trucking company did you give this to? What are the pieces in weight? Ask the shipper at the dock, what are the pieces in weight? It may be different than your rate confirmation sheet. Now when he puts on there 5 pieces, 10,000 pounds, and your rate confirmation sheet says 20 pieces, 80,000 or 40,000 pounds, but now when the load gets stolen, you're on the hook for it because you signed that bill of lading for whatever, or vice versa. So I would just put every shipper on the spot, ask some questions that are kind of open that you know the answer to, but they may not. Right? And I used to do this as a broker all the time. We'd get a call from a carrier, and he'd say, as a carrier, a broker would say, oh, I'm based in Nashville, Tennessee. And he's got an accent that tells, I'm from the Nashville area, and I know what kind of people sound like. And when they have a deep, say, Eastern European accent, for example, I would ask them, what's your favorite barbecue place in Nashville? And when they say, oh, I don't know, I don't really eat barbecue, you're in Pakistan. Yeah. But I think there's all kinds of things like that. Just ask those kind of questions that throw them off guard. If somebody hesitates on an easy question, it's a red flag to me.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. The component of not asking a leading question or giving them the answer within the question, I think just that alone as a nugget to take away is so true and relevant and can be so impactful in and of itself. Are there additional red flags that a driver should be looking for? So that's some of the specific questions they can ask, but are there additional really common red flags besides or in addition to what you kind of mentioned in the entire load tendering process?
Yeah.
Are there other red flags, not even after you ask the question, but prior to that, are there red flags that might tip you off or things to watch for that should send alert bells in a driver's head?
Yeah, it could be the incoming telephone number that comes into your caller ID, doesn't match the FMCSA's data. That's a red flag to me. Or if you Google them and they're not really based where they say they are. Not that Google's the end-all be-all, but we have to use as many tools that are available to us. I think that we have to really dig into using SAFER and L&I. One of the issues that, I think Ken talked about bringing that all together with Modus is if you went to Company Snapshot, which most owner-operators kind of tend to go into Company Snapshot, it may say on their entity carrier/broker. But then you go to L&I, and it says his brokerage authority was taken away 5 years ago. So it puts a false sense of security into the owner-operator saying, well, he's a broker and a carrier. I can see this on his company snapshot, so I'm going to give him the load, even though he hasn't had a authority for a long time. And a lot of the bad guys will do things like maybe join TIA for a couple months and say, oh, here's a picture of I'm certified with TIA, and I'm one of their members, and leave that on their website as they're canceling out their brokerage authority. So the due diligence you're trying to look at and say, oh, he's a member of TIA, he must be good. It says broker carrier over here. So you got to be real careful to watch for those kind of things. Telephone numbers, websites. If a guy's a big broker and he says he's, you look at some of these websites, really kind of funny. A small brokerage from Minot, North Dakota, and his biggest customers are John Deere, Amazon, UPS, all the, come on, dude. Yeah. And you have a Gmail address. If they're a big broker pretending to be a big broker, they would at least, you would think, have a domain for bigbroker.com or something, right? But I would shy away from Gmail addresses, and not that everybody that has a Gmail address is a bad guy, but 99.9% of bad guys have a Gmail address, right? So just additional vetting is always important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great. It's not that a red flag is necessarily a jump to conclusion to being bad. It's that a red flag should be a tipping point to identify more questions, more vetting is needed, right? I think one of the things I've seen in this evolution is the impact on good intention carriers. As a result, whether they have newer authority and or there's additional requirements put on them, it increases the burden that they have to go to. So what are some specific examples of what does verification friction look like to drivers? Whether it's having to take a photo, hold up 3 fingers, stand on your head, whatever it may be, what does that verification look like and how should drivers kind of approach or digest and respond to these expectations?
Yeah, a lot of these vetting platforms have come out, and because, let's say that you're signed up with one of the vetting platforms and a load is stolen. Oh, that vetting platform's horrible, right? So they become so overzealous that maybe they're intruding on the good guys by saying, I'm not going to use you because you don't have an ELD, for instance. Or, well, the truck's a 2000 and the motor's a 1998. I don't have to have an ELD, but they don't. A lot of the vetting platforms have never been in a truck, brokered a load, or unloaded, been in a warehouse. So they can't use technology to make those decisions because it puts the bad guys in a bad place, or the good guys in a bad place. And that's really unfortunate that we're even seeing that happen. It could be that if it's a Sprinter van under 10,000 pounds, not a commercial motor vehicle, so we're saying, oh, there's no ELD, let's cut them all out. You can't do that either. Nope. I think that the best vetting platforms start with objective vetting. Are you in violation of a state or federal law? Let's just start there. Yep. Are you working out of a post office box? Well, that's a violation of 49 CFR 390.5T. If you are affiliated with another FMCSA regulated entity and you haven't disclosed that to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, that's a violation of Public Law 112-141, paragraph 32103. So
is that a real number?
Yeah, and then you go. It's in parentheses after that is DI, but I don't want to bore
details.
So, and it's not illegal to be affiliated with other companies. I mean, you look at Landstar, they have 5 or 6 MC numbers, Ligen. But what is illegal is not disclosing that information to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Sadly, you can't really find that out unless you go to the Freedom of Information Act at FOIA to see if they disclose that affiliation. So those are the kind of things you got to look for. But I think that how I like to look at vetting, and our platform does this, is when you go to the airport, the first thing they ask for is a driver's license and a boarding pass, right? Are you who you say you are? Should you be here? Are you in violation of state or federal law or not? once you pass that, now we can look at more subjective things like how long have you been in business? Have you had any inspections? What does your safety score look like? So that's like, you get through the airport, now I put my bag on the belt, on the belt to check see if I'm carrying liquids or carrying a gun. But let's stop the bad guys from getting in the first place. And I think the FMCSA is doing a better job at closing the front door. The issue is there's a lot of bad people in there now. It's going to take a lot of time to get them out.
Yep.
I mean, if I had my way, we would land this plane for 3 months and fix it and then put the plane back in the air. It's just hard to fix a plane while it's in the air.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. So from our individual perspectives, when we're asked to do certain things or require, we can, in our head, we might not have experienced something that informs why this might be happening. So the question might be, why the heck do I have to do this, right? Can you speak to some of the pressures on the brokers in today's environment and what some of those are that have led to those requirements, or what are brokers experiencing that has driven this increased necessity to vet? And we've talked about it at a broad perspective, but otherwise also specifics from a brokerage seat, what that might look like.
Well, the brokers are under a little bit of pressure now. We have the Supreme Court ruling coming up to decide if they're liable or accountable. That's if the Supreme Court rules that the broker's liable for even a safety issue or whatever, that puts a lot of pressure on them. But what's going to happen if that happens, I think, is now you talk about transparency. Now the brokers are going to go the other way. I want you to be as transparent because I need all your driver's records. I need every mechanic to work on your trucks. They're going to want all this information if they're going to be held liable. My personal opinion, I don't think that the Supreme Court is going to rule that way. Because as a broker, I would just have to say, if the agency that determines whether a carrier is safe or not, if that's their job, and 94% of carriers aren't rated right now, if my job's a broker, I move freight. I'm not a safety guy. Yep. So you got to just keep that kind of in mind. Yep.
I think that's such a huge, impactful story to watch. I've been certainly keeping up on it, but even outside of that court case, I think there's also been an increase of liability put onto the brokers from a contractual standpoint with regard to shippers.
Yeah.
And so whether that's a safety aspect or a cargo theft aspect, there's additional things that are placed into contracts on the broker's plate. So that liability has been increasing behind the scenes, so to speak, as we lead into also what's happening from an insurance and lawsuit perspective that's now reaching the Supreme Court levels. And so this is a huge case that will impact the entire industry from that standpoint.
Yeah, I think in the past it used to be that the shipper would say, "You're responsible. I hired you to do this. You fix it." And a lot of times, especially when times are tough, a broker will say, "Well, I'm going to eat it because I'm going to lose that customer. He's getting 25 cold calls a day. I'm just going to have to eat it and just deal with it." And everyone thinks that fraud has grown exponentially over the years, which has grown significantly, but not exponentially. I think the reporting of fraud has grown more and more, because it used to be that if I got double brokered or something bad happened, that shipper's going to think that I'm not good at my job. Yep. So they wouldn't tell them about it, and they would just eat it.
Yeah. What if a driver could get verified once in one place and then just show any broker we're good to go? How far away are we from that? What's the closest? What would you say might be the closest version of that today?
I think that the motor system is going to be that down the road. But in the meantime, I've been talking for about 3 years about getting these vetting platforms to come together and work together, not to trade secrets, but to trade information about the bad guys. If he's a bad guy on one platform and he's not on another, the bad guy is just going to say, "Well, I'll use a broker that's not with that company. I'll use a broker that's..." But if we start laying that over, and 3 years ago when I brought that notion up, a lot of people thought I was crazy, and they said, there's a fine line between competition and collaboration. Yeah. Well, fast forward 3 years, on May 14th, we have those entities all coming together at a roundtable at the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's office in Washington, D.C., talking to 5 or 6 SME experts at FMCSA to say, how do we work together? Yeah. We've been doing vetting for a long time, and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration could probably get some tips from us, right? And the other side is there's a lot of vetting platforms and brokers and carriers that don't understand what the FMCSA's limitations are. Well, the FMCSA should do this, the FMCSA should do that. Well, the FMCSA is run by Congress or an administrative law judge who in 2019, there was a case called the the FMCSA versus Riojas case, where an administrative law judge says as that regulatory body does not have the ability to impose civil penalties. So now how can you find somebody if you have to put it over to DOJ or someone else to impose the penalties. So I think that's really important, that we come together and say, okay, what are your limitations? Where can we meet you, right?
Yeah. We did a panel yesterday on AI in the driver's seat and AI's role for helping and impacting the drivers' lives. In this context, if we look at instinct versus algorithm, right, where does instinct still play such a significant role, and where does AI tools and solutions start to show up or start to provide a meaningful impact and really be able to help in this verification process?
Yeah, I think AI, no one should use a platform that uses strictly AI or intelligence to determine whether you should use a carrier or broker or not. There's a lot of instinct that comes in, it's like asking the questions, those kind of things, because AI is not developed to make your decision. It's to get you to your decision a little faster. So yeah. I think that's I think, and just hitting on the safety side, I talked a little bit about 94% approximately of all motor carriers are not rated. That doesn't mean they're safe, doesn't mean they're unsafe, just means we don't know, right? So I think where AI could really come into play, especially when you're talking about the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, if we could use some AI and say, let's start at each spectrum, right? The guy that's been in business for 25 years never had so much as a speeding ticket. Let's start with them and get them certified and get them rated. Yep. Let's start with the guys that are horrible and move backwards and get them out. Right? And now as we use AI, we can move closer to the middle and get maybe more. If anybody thinks that we can send a bunch of inspectors out to inspect 326,000 motor carriers, that would take over 50 years. It's not like you can walk into Landstar and say, I'm here doing an inspection, and you're out in 15 minutes with a clipboard. It takes 3 or 4 weeks to get through that. So we've got to put some reality back in, and that comes again with the training piece. We've got to talk to owner-operators and small fleets, and we've got to find better ways to communicate with them. I was just at the booth with the FMCSA, and I said some things we can do. 51% of the 300,000 carriers is 1 truck or less, or 2 trucks or less, right? So they're not getting the same information that everybody else is. They're not on Twitter all day and on LinkedIn, or they may listen to Sirius XM radio. But I'd like to see the day when you pull into a scale and they're handed a piece of paper that says, "Here's all the new regulations. Here's the new rulemakings we come up. Here's a way to give that to them." Or we have these signs that say, "Fasten your seatbelt" with some funny thing on it. How about "Don't sell your MC number"? And then it says FMCSA at DOT.gov. I think there's better ways to communicate to the owner-operators than we're doing now.
Yeah. A lot of drivers might treat a relationship with a broker as a transaction, right? Get the load, move on. How does that play into fraud and cargo theft? And what does building relationships actually look like, practically speaking?
Yeah, I said this yesterday, and I've lived this life when I was a broker. If you're a broker and not treating your carrier like a customer, get out of the business. Because that's the most important customer you've got, really. Yep. That's the lifeblood of what you're doing. So I think that brokers have to treat carriers with just the utmost respect, because without them, you are not doing anything. I mean, it just eats me up really hard when we're saying, we're going to detain you for 5 hours, we're going to give you $50 for it. And by the way, while you're waiting for 5 hours, we're not going to let you use our restroom. Those days have got to be gone. It's all, we talk about algorithms and data, tech and everything, but face-to-face is the best way to do anything. And meeting somebody and talking to them, building a relationship, that's how you get through this thing. And when you can meet somebody face-to-face, have dinner with them, you're way more likely to give them some freight than just some guy you met off the load board and never talked to before, and his safety ratings, you don't know. We just got to be better at talking to each other.
Yeah. From some of the things we've seen, at least from truckstop.com's perspective, is the moving into more of relationship-based load coverage. And so we introduced private loads to be able to work with people you've worked with in the past. And then also age authority filter. One of the, again, negatives that has come out of this increased vetting is maybe newer authority carriers might find it difficult to find shippers or brokers that will work with them. And so we've introduced the ability to filter loads that are based off of brokers that will work with you. But what are additional ways from an owner-operator's perspective that they can start to build these relationships? Or where do you begin? How do you start to identify who might be good people to work with, and then how do you expand that relationship from transaction to trusted? What's that look like?
Yeah, I think it's almost like you would want to send your resume, right? Every action has a reaction. Every time we come up with another way to vet somebody, the bad guy will get into it. Or the one thing that was really kind of drove me crazy, there was a platform several years ago, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, that said, if you didn't have this many inspections, we're not going to use you. That's ridiculous. A guy could be running from Minot to Minneapolis every night. The scales aren't open. He's not going to get an inspection. So how can you penalize somebody like that? Or saying, oh, you've only been in business for 9 months or 12 months, whatever that benchmark is. Well, what if I worked for Yellow, and I've been there for 30 years, and I have 3 million miles under my belt, and I've had it with the man. I don't want to work for somebody anymore. I'm going to go buy a truck. Now I can't use you for a year? You're probably one of the best drivers on the road. So what that action caused a reaction to say, well, they're on to us with this. I'm just going to go buy somebody else's MC number and their safety score, and I've been in business for 12 years. I'm going to get loads tonight. Well, that guy can't get a load for a year.
Yeah. So working with the same brokers consistently, does that eliminate all of the risk?
No.
Some of it?
A lot. Yeah. I think there's a lot. Now, one thing I really like about truckstop.com is the waterfall, right? Choose these guys first, the guys you know first, and then if you have to go to another level, let's go to there. Somebody, you don't not trust them, but I just don't know them as well as the other guy. Yep. So that waterfall thing is, I think, one of the most ingenious things Truckstop came up with. It's just, I wish I had that when I was a broker, and a carrier.
Agreed. Absolutely. What is it? So like, there's, I can't even number, you might know the number of different fraud tactics and schemes that are out there. What's the most prevalent one, and what's maybe the newest one, or one that you've seen that is interesting, wild, or otherwise concerning?
I think the most wild one that's come up recently is the guy that's going to deliver to an Amazon facility, for instance, a big company like Amazon. Well, let's say Amazon, because they're big. Yep. And he's on his way to the facility, and about 1.5 miles or 2 away, there's a truck painted up with a pickup that's got an Amazon logo on the side that says, we are so full, you're going to have to wait a long time, so we're going to take you into our other warehouse right here. The guy will back in there. The guy's dressed in an Amazon hat. He's got an Amazon, everything. The guy drops the freight, takes off, gives a signed POD, freight's gone. And that's becoming more and more popular.
Wow. That's wild. What are some of the most common commodities or lanes, or certain lanes that we're seeing targeted currently?
Well, for commodities, it used to be high-value commodities. Now it's ability to resell commodities. That's why you see tobacco for Tucker Carlson, or soft drinks. Those are easy to sell. It's not really easy to sell and that's why a lot of people are moving to heavy haul. It's not really easy to sell a 100,000-pound crane. No. Right? But any commodity that's used by people, that's a black market quick. We're going to dump that stuff and have it sold in a black market. And the other thing that they do is they'll take a load and then repackage it, and sometimes sell it back to the person who actually tendered that freight before. Wow. So the fraudsters have more time, energy, and money than we have to fight them. So that's why we got to try and stay ahead of them the best we can.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we've talked about kind of the red flags, how to identify them, how to drill into them, how to find out more. Now let's talk about, what do you do, right? Let's say you're already rolling, but something feels off, like you're headed to pick up, or you're headed in where you're going. What do you do when something starts to feel off? What's the next step? What should I do in the next 5-10 minutes?
Well, stay in good. If you're a small fleet, stay in contact with your security people at your trucking company. But also, the days, I think, should be gone that the driver doesn't have communication with the shipper. It used to be, don't call my shipper for any reason. Yep. Well, now we get into, like, who's in charge, how much control do you have? So I think you should get rid of that anyway. And I think that if there's a problem happening somewhere, don't always just call the broker, because he may be lying to you, right? Call the shipper. That's your relationship as a motor carrier, and the relationship with the shipper. That's where the relationship is. It happens to be an intermediary in the middle that's going to hand you your money later. But that's who your relationship is with. That's who's going to come after you in a claim. All those kind of things. You've got to be able to call up and say, hey, something doesn't feel right, Mr. Shipper. Is this really changed to an office, a warehouse in Phoenix? I'm supposed to go to Santa Fe, New Mexico. And he goes, no, that's not supposed to change, right? So any kind of change, and especially if you get a call halfway through and say, hey, we changed this from Phoenix to our warehouse in Glendale, California, put on the brakes and make a phone call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was running a fleet in a brokerage, we had one that delivered it was a false destination, and so the delivery was on a side street. They cross-docked it onto another truck, and after the fact, the driver said, "Yeah, it didn't seem right. It didn't seem off." But they didn't ask questions, and they didn't drive in more.
Yeah, we just worked on one where it was a reefer load of beef, and it had the address where it's going to be delivered to, but didn't have the name of the store, right, or the facility. And this is 40,000 pounds of beef. And so the guy got diverted, supposed to go to Phoenix, and he says, "No, you're going to go to someplace in California." The address that he was supposed to go to in Phoenix was a Kroger store. Some Kroger stores are really big, but I don't know of any that take 50,000 pounds of beef, right? So they sent him to this other, he didn't make any phone calls, didn't call anybody, didn't call the receiver, just deliver this freight to an unmanned warehouse, or, with one guy there. So, I mean, again, you've been beat up for a long time. Questions have been asked of you. You have the responsibility and the ability to ask questions yourselves.
Mm-hmm. What is the evolution of law enforcement looked like in their involvement with strategic cargo theft? And are there resources or contacts or approaches to go from that standpoint to engage law enforcement, or what has been their availability as well as their involvement in not only tracking this, but then what to do after the fact?
Yeah, in the past, and even happening a little bit now, when you call local law enforcement, they say it's a civil thing. We're not really going to get involved. We don't really know how to do that. But I think that anytime there's a cargo theft, that you need to report it to the authorities where it was picked up and where it's supposed to deliver to. Even if they say we can't handle this, get a police report. Then you call the FBI. There's a cargo unit at the FBI in Philadelphia. The guy that runs, that I know very well, is Jason Knight. You report it to them and say, "Here's a copy of the police report." May or may not get the freight back for you, but at least they start the ball rolling. And it used to be with the FBI, well, this isn't egregious enough. It's got to be $1 million or more. But we're learning in more conversations we have with the Bureau is that $10,000 load may be the missing puzzle piece that we have this whole thing. So they're starting to take those calls more. I think that everybody should be behind the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act. That Senator Fisher from Nebraska has introduced that. It's making its way through the committees. A guy named Scott Cornell, we know Scott. He helped write some of that legislation. But that will allow the FBI to start working with state and federal authorities to kind of, let's work together more.
Yeah.
That's an act that I would recommend everybody to contact your lawmaker and say, let's get behind this.
Yeah, and there's often, and Scott Cornell talks about this a lot, there's a terminology gap when you're talking to law enforcement. I experienced that personally when I went through a cargo theft with the brokerage I was running. Had to call the police department and explain what this strategic cargo theft looked like, that someone emailed us with an email address that had a Q in place of a G in the domain name, and the team didn't recognize that, tendered the load to this person, who then tendered it to that person, and that police officer, I couldn't see him through the phone, but you could tell he was a deer in the headlights. He's like, "So what happened?"
Yeah, right. And a lot of times they say theft, and unless you're saying cargo theft, they don't really know the difference.
Yep.
So that's really important.
Yeah, and I know the California State Patrol has a cargo theft task force, and so you're seeing more and more I think, awareness and realization. But one of the things that can help close that gap is thinking the terminology and how we educate and also, talk through these situations.
Yeah, and we're starting to see more action from the federal level too. Just in this administration, there's been a new position made. It's the the Secretary of Multimodal. It's this assistant secretary job to Mr. Duffy. The person that runs that is Mike Rutherford, and he's in charge of developing a freight cargo theft task force. Matter of fact, I'm representing Truck Stop in a meeting with him on the 7th of April in New Jersey to talk about how we can help work together, the agency and us work together to come up with some ideas to make that even better.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I have become so much more aware of is how interconnected a lot of these components or groups, bad actors tend to be. One of the things you kind of mentioned is talking about, or you talked about related incidents. Another incident I went through, we received a call from an insurance investigator on a completely separate load who had uncovered a warehouse in Arizona that was about 40,000 square feet that had product that was stolen off of one of our loads in it. All of the warehouse was completely all stolen product. They had tracked back to over 50 fake LLCs and companies involved with the theft and or the storage and or the carrier aspect of this. And so there's deep interconnected networks that are often driving or behind a lot of these,
right.
Correct?
And that's why I talked about at the very beginning, how we need to have our vetting platforms, our shippers, our brokers, our load boards all talking together, because there's no doubt in my mind that they're working together. They're developing these relationships. And I spent a long time in the Marine Corps, and there's the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. We don't ever see one of them go fight the whole war, right? It's just like this. I can't fight the war without a load board that's working with me, or a shipper that's working with me. We have those 5 branches come together for a reason. This is an enemy.
Yeah. What, from a documentation standpoint, are there good documentation behaviors or habits to make sure that you're tracking either before, during, or after the load, from a more of a paperwork or documentation standpoint?
Yeah, I think that you have to really watch what's on the bill of lading. If the broker's name's on the bill of lading, hard stop. Right? The broker's name does not belong in the bill of lading. I wish that we'd come up with a platform that has a universal bill of lading so they all look kind of the same, so we know which block to fill out and where things belong. What I'd really like to see down the road is have facial recognition verification. We were the first to start that, and people thought I was crazy back in 2022. Now FMCSA uses IDEMIA, you all use, Truck Stop uses one, the other companies use them. So I would like to see the day that we have the person who's picking up the load, his facial recognition verification that he went through to vet him matches the bill of lading. So when he shows up, the VIN number matches, and here's the guy that's picking up the freight. Here's what he looks like.
Yeah.
And the same with the receiver. Why did we change who's delivering my goods? This isn't the driver I gave it to.
Yeah.
I think we could just tighten some things up there. But I think that you have to look at the paperwork, make sure your name is on that bill of lading, no matter what. You're the carrier, your name should be on it.
Yeah.
The pieces of weight should be matching the rate confirmation sheet. We should be making sure that the truck is insured if you're a broker. I think that, and let's switch back to the broker, the shipper side. I think that the 3 questions the 3 things they should ask for on the shipper side is just like if you're pulled over by a law enforcement officer. What are the 3 things they ask for every single time? License, insurance, registration. If you're a shipper and you said to the driver, I need your license, insurance, registration. Okay, I've ID'd you. I got your license. Your registration, that doesn't match what's on the door. You better have a lease agreement. I don't have one. You're supposed to carry one in your truck with you. Then the third is insurance. The insurance that I get for that truck should match the COI that I got from the broker, right? So I think those are the 3 most important things. Too many people to say, they tell the shipper, hey, check the DOT number on the door. Magnets are cheap.
Yeah.
Check the VIN number.
Yep. There's obviously a lot of talk around the non-domiciled CDLs and other components of that often are focused on or impact from the safety component of transportation. But is there overlap into the theft side, and what's that look like?
Yeah, I always talk about reactions. Actions have reactions, and we all have seen in the news that I think in California, 17,000 CDLs were taken away for non-domiciled CDL. That was the action. The reaction is that there's no requirement for a vehicle that's under 10,001 pounds to be a commercial motor vehicle. They can speak English or not. They don't have to have either one. They don't have to have a CDL license. It's a lot cheaper to move that truck because I'm not paying for 18 tires, I'm paying for 4. We have seen an onslaught of those guys moving into the expedited side because they're not regulated. So we didn't take 17,000 drivers off the road. We put them in different trucks. And now they're running, and it's doing the same thing that happened in the big trucks. It's driving the price down. So again, when I talk about how vetting platforms can work, the FMCSA couldn't do rulemaking to fix that. Congress would have to change that rule to determine what a commercial motor vehicle is. I don't think that 1 pound should make a difference. If you're 1 pound or 80,000 pounds, you should be regulated. And the other thing about when we talk about sprinters, let's say that sprinter is under 10,000 pounds, but the shipper gives him 1,000 pounds of hazmat. He's not a commercial motor vehicle, but who's checking? No one. If you make them all the same. And again, rulemaking can't make that happen. It has to take an act of Congress, as we say. But if we work together with the vetting platforms, we can have an industry rule that says, unless you have a DOT number and you speak English, we're not going to load you. And so, just like a restaurant, we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. And we should be able to do that as an industry. Now, if that catches on, now we can give the FMCSA or the Congress time to meet us in the middle and say, that's a good idea, let's make that into law. It would take a lot longer for us to stop it than them to come up with a law.
Yeah, yeah. We have a little bit more time. I have a few more questions, but we want to see if there's any questions from the audience. Anybody has a question?
I guess we did good.
Ah.
This came up in another meeting that I was having, and it's kind of more like a broad question, but I've noticed, in particular in my state, which is Georgia, and then I talked to people recently, so North Carolina, South Carolina, we're not seeing as many DOT trucks out on the road lately doing inspections. And I just wondered, like, if you know anything about why that is, or if that's part of them talking about maybe some of their forces back out there to get the trucks, because we can talk about, what needs to be on the side of the truck all day, but it doesn't seem like they know how to enforce that at the local level.
You're saying you don't see DOT numbers on the side of the door?
I don't see DOT trucks.
Oh, DOT inspection trucks?
Yeah, I just don't see them doing inspections.
Yeah, I don't think, and this is just speculation on my part, but I think that you're seeing more of the enforcement happening at the scales rather than on the side of the highways right now. I think they're looking more at the non-domicile CDL at the side, because if you pull over one truck on the side of the road, you can get 15 at the truck stop or at the weigh station.
But what about when weigh stations are closed?
Well,
Is that only like when they're open? That seems like that just leaves a like wide open space for anybody who wants to run fraud just run at night.
yeah, and I wish I had an answer to that question, but I can't determine what the DOT does, but I know for a fact, and speaking to the administrator, that they are clamping down on enforcement. And how that's happening, I don't know, but I do know that there are dozens of investigations open right now on carriers and trucks. So I don't know how to answer that question. And each state's a little bit different too.
Yeah, sometimes I just like to ask questions because it's like part of a bigger conversation.
Yeah. Absolutely. Question back there.
So, I wanted to ask sorry. Hello, I wanted to ask about the shippers, and when are we going to start to actually make them have a proper insurance if there's a stolen load? Because there's a lot of issues with that. I personally lost about $500,000 because of that. We've been a victim of fraud, and it's every day is getting more and more scary. But basically, shipper most of the time is a private business, and they have so much power that is related to ELDs and now freight fraud, and those people might be in a trouble in their business and not higher educated or high IQ, let's say, in shipping people, which will cause, losses, like hundreds of thousands of dollars. I had a load of copper that was loaded to a random truck. And it's insane what is going on over there. So I just wondered why there is a custody move between the dock and the trailer, basically, right? Which is the law, and then we're putting the signatures on it, and there's nothing happening afterwards. Like shipper is just,
Yeah, well, the FMCSA or any body doesn't really regulate a shipper. But I will say that if you listen to Secretary Duffy's had several press conferences about we're going to start holding shippers to account. Where that comes from, we're not really sure on the safety side of it, but we are sure on the safety side of it that if a shipper loads somebody that when he's talking to him in the conversation, he can't speak any English or another violation, well, that becomes negligence at that point, and he should be held responsible. And I'm just going to predict in the next 6 to 8 months, there's going to be a shipper that's going to be held to account. Because I don't think the Secretary would make such an emphasis on that if that wasn't going to happen. There's going to be some shipper that's going to load a truck on a truck he shouldn't have, and he's going to be held responsible for it. I think that's going to happen sooner than later.
We have time for one more.
I just have a question about, you were talking about, scared me. You were talking about when cargo was diverted, someone gets a hold of your rate con somehow and calls you and says, we need you to reposition that load to X, Y, and Z. Since we're talking mostly about interstate freight, starting in one state, ending in another state, doesn't that automatically fall under federal jurisdiction just because it's interstate freight?
Are you talking about the under 10,000 pound freight?
No. Just freight theft. When they divert your freight to a warehouse in Phoenix and offload it, and you were supposed to go to California, whatever. But isn't it interstate? isn't it an interstate crime falling under federal jurisdiction because you're starting in Illinois and you're supposed to end up in California and you got robbed in Phoenix? Why are you calling the local jurisdictions that they don't handle that kind of thing any more than any other kind of interstate crime?
It's because that's where the thefts usually started. So you want to get a police report from where the freight was supposed to pick up, just to start the ball rolling. But the problem is we don't know what the jurisdiction is. And some people say it's a civil matter, some say it's a criminal matter. So we have to get that figured out. And I think that's what Cork is trying to do, is get that all wound together. When the laws were written, there wasn't a bunch of cargo theft, so they didn't write a bunch of laws about it. They, like, this will never happen. So the transportation department's so far behind in getting those laws put out there, I think, that no one really knows what to do. And I think that's where Corker comes in and says, let's try and fix this thing before, it's important now. It's just sad that it's taking so long to get that law passed. We got to get this thing out there, and we got to start educating people more. What can local law enforcement do? And I know that organizations like TAPA, the Transportation of
Protected assets.
Yeah, for theft. I would encourage you to join TAPA. It's TAPA, I think, .org. Yep. But they're working with folks to say, how do we bring this together, and who do we contact, and when do we contact them? But again, a local municipality doesn't really know about cargo theft or even how it works or how they're involved. So that's where we got to bring federal, state, and local law enforcement together and get that message out there. We have a lot of problems that have happened over the 50 years in registration and safety. And, it's like if you feed a guy cheeseburgers for 50 years, he goes to be 1,000 pounds. We're not going to get that weight off overnight.
Transported Assets Protection Association.
Yeah, there it is.
TAPA. Awesome. Well, it's been a great pleasure. If every driver in this room does one thing differently on their next load, what should it be?
You know what? Just so happen to build something for owner-operators and small fleets. And if you got a pen, you can remember this password. It's FV, like Freight Validate, check. And just because you're here at Matt's, I'm going to give this to you for free. If you put in that FV check as your password, hey Siri, check Freight Validate.
Sure, what's the MC number?
387211.
The company Direct Expedite LLC is a broker and is freight validated.
So in 4 seconds, you can find out if that company's breaking a law or not breaking a law. You also find out if they're a broker or a carrier. If I got that message and I was a carrier and it said, this is a carrier, why would I take load from a carrier?
That's awesome.
Yes, if you go to whatsyourmcnumber.com and it'll ask you for a code, and because I don't give this to everybody, but you're at Matt's, FV check. Freight Validate, FV, check. The website, whatsyourmcnumber.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Dale, for being here. Go check out Freight Validate, truckstop.com. I'm on LinkedIn. We have a company LinkedIn, Facebook as well. We're also at booth 16160. Feel free to stop by to talk to us or others more and check out some of the things that we're doing. Thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of your day and rest of your event.
Thank you very much.